Envase Technologies creates a suite of solutions that makes it easier to run your trucking business. For drivers and carriers, our solutions put control back in your hands with a TMS, capacity and storage marketplace, and rate management system. Optimize your operations with less administrative headaches and increase the value of your time spent on and off the clock. Envase Technologies, driving progress, delivering innovation. For more information, visit envasetechnologies.com. That's ENVASE Technologies.com.
Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And today with me on the show is Holly Pierce, supply chain champion to the stars, I think. I don't know. She'll correct me a little bit later. And I'm super excited to have her here because we've got some hot topics to talk about, including how Apple and Samsung are thinking about their supply chains, how they're de-risking them, and so much more. But before we get into that, let's hear from our show sponsor. So are you ready to find your people? If you are struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. We created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in our three distinct value-packed communities: the Supply Chainers, Women in Supply Chain, and the Creative Room. From the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the Supply Chainers to the empowering community-focused space of Women in Supply Chain and the marketing mastermind of the Creative Room, we mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. So head over to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com to explore which community is right for you. And for anybody who's watching, we want to know where you are watching from. So head over to the comments. Let us know where you are watching from today. All right, let's talk about what's happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain for this week. So episode 399, that's right. Next Monday, we are releasing episode 400. Wow, I can't even believe that we're at episode 400. But for this week, we're at episode 399, and it's our Woman in Supply Chain episode with Pam Simon of Manifest. And she talks all about her incredible journey from starting her own company, moving countries, and then finally finding a home with Manifest. So you do not want to miss this one. Go and check it out wherever you listen to the podcast, because her journey is pretty incredible. And I can't wait for you to hear it. All right. So Friday, Eric Johnson is going to go live for Log Tech Live, and he's talking about shipping shenanigans from fees to freedom. Now, I'm not entirely sure exactly what that means, but I definitely want to watch this one on Friday. So click the attend button, even if you cannot attend live, and I will send you the recording so you don't miss a minute of it. And then, of course, we've got Relax Talks. This is happening April 10th, and they're talking about the in-store experience. Now, this has everything to do with supply chain because we're talking about new omni-channel experiences. This is what customers are looking for. And part of those omni-channel is the in-store experience, what it means to the customer. What does it mean for the marketing department, the customer service department? How can supply chain support that? So go and click the attend button and watch live next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. If you can't attend live, click the attend button. I will send you the link to the recording. All right, last but not least, you heard me earlier talk about the Secret Society of Supply Chain. I'm going to be talking about it so much more because we have so much to offer. Now, our Woman in Supply Chain community, we've actually launched our first cohort already. They are in month 2, and some of the feedback that I'm getting is that our Woman in Supply Chain monthly meetup is better than Chief. I mean, it is incredible, the feedback that we're getting. And we are 50% sold out for cohort number 2. So definitely sign up and get your membership today. All right. Now it's time to bring up our guest for today. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Sarah. I'm doing well. And while I like the idea of supply chain champion to the stars, I am a supply chain champion for all. I'm
For all, okay.
people's champion, as they say.
I literally said it and I was like, oh, she's going to correct me later.
Like, I mean, if the stars care about it, I would love to chat with them about it. But yes.
I love it. I love it. So tell everybody who you are, what you do, why you're the supply chain champion.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so I'm Holly Pierce. My current role is Director of Logistics with C&D Technologies and Trojan Battery Company. They are one of the oldest manufacturers of lead acid and AGM gel batteries, and we recently added lithium to that. We manufacture in 5 plants in North America, and we ship to over 100 countries around the world. We export a lot. So, but prior to that, I've spent many years, 24.
Don't say it.
I know. But honestly, I've seen so many changes, and that's why I'm really excited to talk to you today about some of the articles and the things that we found, because I am that person who is a historian, right? I was there. I've seen the changes and I've seen where we're going and what we can do in the future. As far as being a supply chain champion, it's because it's in my blood. I literally every time I hear anything going on, whether it's what happened, the tragedy last week at the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, what's going on in the Red Sea, anything that's going on that may impact the flow of goods and services around the world, it catches my attention.
Mm-hmm. And you've got a tough job because most of what you ship are dangerous goods. I sat
Correct.
there while you did your presentation at TPM talking about dangerous goods. And
Yes.
I have handled dangerous goods in the past as a logistician, if I can use that term. But from your standpoint, there's so many different things that you have to think about, rules, regulations in different countries, and it's not necessarily just up to the logistics company that you're working with to know all of that. You need to know all of that because at the end of the day, you're going to get penalized if something happens.
Exactly. It's your name on the product. It's your name
Mhm.
on the bill of lading manifest, absolutely. And what I would say is, to equip yourself to learn as much as possible about what your goods are. So with the classification, obviously, as well as, what are the requirements? Documentation is really important. And then the final piece would be collaboration. You need to let everyone know. So whether it's your logistics service providers, it's the steamship lines, it's the truckers, it's even the local, fire brigade that is in your town so that they know that if they come into your facility for, an event, what to expect, right? It's just being that good servant leader that shares as much as they can with everyone and does their best to be transparent.
It's so interesting because now we're having holistic conversations around supply chain where you're talking about who are the community leaders that you as a supply chain professional need to bring in the fold so that they understand your business. Because if something happens, they know how to deal with it in the moment and a lot quicker than they would if they didn't know. And it almost makes me think about cybersecurity as well. Because when we think about cybersecurity, we need to have a chain of command and who's going to go to, the authorities, the FBI and different things like that. Who's going to catch it? What does that mean? How does it go up the channel? And so I love the fact that we're having these types of holistic conversations where we're bringing in different people. Supply chain isn't just for supply chain professionals. They're for communities and the world at large.
Absolutely, I agree. And again, having that plan in place and having the right people trained up on it is essential. If the pandemic taught us nothing else, it's to understand when something catastrophic happens, how do you respond? How do you protect your most valuable asset, which in my opinion is your people, right? So how do you protect them while also being in the battery storage solutions industry? We were essential personnel. So how do we continue to make our product and get it out to those people who need it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to our poll of the week. So, the question that we asked everybody, what quality do you value most in a business? Now, we had 237 votes for this one, and 37% of you, which is weird. I swear I looked at this yesterday, it said 38%. Anyways, somebody must have changed their vote. 37% of you said transparency, 34% of you said innovation and adaptability, and 28% of you said collaboration. What do you think about this, Holly? And what is the one that you would choose?
I'm surprised that collaboration is in third place. Like, seriously? And
Mm.
maybe it's just because of my interactions with service providers and even as a consumer, right? Like, to me, collaboration and making sure that everyone's on the same page is really important, as I just said about, hazmat goods.
Mhm.
But, I think transparency speaks to, ESG, environmental social governance concerns that people have and being really transparent with what your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 programs are.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of surprised at that too. Although innovation and adaptability, but also
Mhm.
transparency. Like we're going to be talking a little bit later on
Yeah.
about pay inequality.
Yeah.
And so I feel like transparency really should be one of the top two. But obviously, I mean, I say collaboration is the future of business all the
I was
time.
gonna
So I think
say,
collaboration should be up. So I think it's almost all three.
yeah,
I
and
can't
they were
decide.
close. Like,
Nobody's
it was
making
what?
me
Like,
decide
8
on this
points
one.
between them. We're fine.
Nobody is making me decide. All right. So now it's time to give us a bit of a market update. What's kind of happening in your world? I mean, you're a shipper. And so you're dealing with all sorts of service providers, technology, you know, manufacturers, so many moving parts, so many different things. So talk to us about what's happening in your world that people need to pay attention to.
Absolutely, and as we all know, last week, the Baltimore Bridge collapse was a huge shock for us all in the morning when
Mm.
we woke up and saw that. And what I will say is, I'm really impressed with how the Port of Baltimore and even those around reacted, not just in a physical manner, right? Because the state police were able to block off the bridge and really limit the amount of casualties, but also being able to expertly go into the digital world and be able to share the information ongoing, what's going on, all the stages of preparedness, and what we're doing to kind of take those containers that are now in essence isolated and stuck in the port of Baltimore. In fact, I just saw a report this morning about how they're using rail. I think it's Norfolk Southern and CSX are going to be railing some of those containers out that can't get out and moving them to alternate locations. So what I would say is if you have a lot of freight that is moving in the mid-Atlantic corridor, right, from, let's say Port of New York, New Jersey down to, Baltimore, but also even down to the Port of Virginia, be aware, understand that there's going to be a lot less, I would say, inbound containers going there, right? So some of the equipment availability may be skewed. There might be repositioning of equipment around the mid-Atlantic states. Additionally, just be aware that trucking is going to be a little more constricted as well because you're not going to have as much consumption going on necessarily of those ocean containers.
Mhm.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Red Sea, right? The Houthis and the ongoing challenges that we face there. So in my current role, I'm primarily an exporter, which is a unique position because when I was with Lumber Liquidators, I imported like 20,000 containers a year. And so now being on the opposite side of things, it's made me look at, my potential hiccups in a different way. So that is ongoing. Obviously, we have Maersk and the other primary steamship lines saying, nah, we're not going to go back there. It's not safe just yet, right?
Mhm.
And so that means there's going to be longer transit times because they're going around the Cape of Good Hope. There's going to be, alternates that, you're going to be paying for a congestion fee or the Red Sea surcharge, things like that as an importer. Be aware of that. I would raise my hand early and often to my executive team to let them know that these are what you would consider extraordinary expenses that are going to be for everyone, right? So it doesn't matter your size, you're going to be impacted by this. For me as an exporter, knock on wood, thankfully, I haven't seen significant disruption. I've been able to get my containers booked, loaded, haven't seen any increase in rates or fees. So that's been really beneficial to my organization.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and the last point I would say is that, we're finishing up our ocean negotiation period, right? As shippers, we often do. And so my 2 cents, or what I've witnessed, is that the steamship lines, while they are looking for a recovery from what happened, in 2023, where the rates fell significantly from those high positions of pandemic glory for them, I think they're going to be pretty flat, if not even a little lower, just because of the competition from the big players in the steamship, especially in the Trans-Pacific eastbound.
Wow, that's a great market update. Now, last week on Thoughts and Coffee, I spoke to Lars Jensen as well.
Yeah.
He talked a little bit about Baltimore. He also talked about the Red Sea. So you might want to go check that out if you didn't watch that episode. Because he was talking, I think somebody in the US government came out and said that Baltimore was one of the busiest ports in the US. But what Lars said last week was that
Yeah.
it's not, and that the
No.
disruption would be localized to that particular region. So just, be careful what you're, listening to, and do a little bit of research, and, just make sure before we spread too much misinformation. All right.
Correct.
So let's get to our first article. Now, this article I came across on The Hustle, and it's talking about professional conferences being full of harassment. I think that's a bit of a clickbaity title. I mean, there is harassment.
Just a touch.
Yeah, a report said that 39% of keynote speakers report harassment being at a conference. I mean, 39% is really high. We have some work to do so that, diverse voices in general feel safe and comfortable being at conferences. And it's one of the reasons why we need to talk about it. In this particular instance, in this example that they talk about, a woman was harassed at an in-person conference, and she said no. He pulled out a knife, which takes it to a complete extreme. But we have to talk about these things because we need to know what actually is going on and what to look for when we have these situations happen. And he wasn't even an attendee of the conference. He was just there at some of the after parties with his buddies. So
Right.
some of the things to consider. What did you think about this, Holly?
I mean, I feel like sometimes I'm a globetrotter. I go to conferences all the time, specifically industry conferences, right? So related to supply chain, logistics, batteries in general. And I have observed behavior that is not becoming of what I would consider a professional environment. Thankfully, I have not personally experienced it, but I will say that one of the salient points from the article was that maybe limiting alcohol intake. And while I understand that people blow off steam, I kind of agree. A lot of times folks maybe forget that this is a professional event or they're representing their organizations
Mm-hmm.
and things become out of hand.
Yeah.
And then, honestly, what I like to think about is, have a plan, right? If you have friends or coworkers that are there, check in with them, make sure you see how they're doing if you're at an event together. I know we were recently just at TPM in Long Beach, and we would just check in and say, hey, where are we going next? And like, so we could check in on each other.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, it's important to have what I would consider like, the signal, right? So if something's getting out of control or you feel like you're backed into a corner, like
Mm-hmm.
how do your friends know to be like, oh, hey, Sarah, we have to go. Remember, we have to go to this other meeting. Yeah, like exactly. Without jumping up and down and being like, right? And
Yeah,
and
I mean,
the last piece of it to me, Ron, honestly, is just keep your eyes open. Like if you see someone that looks like they're uncomfortable,
mhm.
regardless of their background, man, woman, like ethnic background, sexuality, if you see someone who looks like they're like uncomfortable, it's never a bad thing to like interject yourself and say, oh, hey, I'm Holly, it's nice to meet you.
Mhm.
How is this, like, kind of inject yourself in to kind of diffuse maybe what might be some tension going on.
Yeah. One of the solutions that they talked about in this particular article was an app to anonymously report incidents, which I thought
Right.
was kind of cool.
Right.
At TPM, we had the Women's Lounge, which was nice
Yeah.
because we were able to sort of get together, decompress in
Yeah.
in an environment that, we wanted to be in, and also meet other women at the event. When you're at an event with like 5,500 people in that surrounding area, it's very difficult sometimes to really meet up. And so that allowed us to do that. One of the other things that I want to talk about is harassment isn't just for in-person conferences. It's also business meals, meetings, and on social media. And one of the things that I wanted to call out, because I feel like LinkedIn is getting a bad name on
I know.
TikTok because everybody's like, oh, everybody just goes on LinkedIn, they pat each other on the back and give kudos and all that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, I was watching something the other day, and this woman got harassed on Instagram, and it really affected her mental health. And she's in her early 20s.
Hmm.
And because of all the hate that she was getting. And I was like, would you rather that, or would you rather be in an encouraging environment like LinkedIn where people are actually held accountable to what they say and what they do, and things have to be a little bit more respectful, which in my mind really helps with the mental health side and all that kind of stuff of social media. So I feel like it's getting a bad rap. Just want to put it out there. I think LinkedIn is a great place.
Absolutely, I do too, and I agree that when it comes to the other social media, opportunities that you have, gosh, sometimes you can be trolled, you can be doxxed. There are things that happen. And I would say that the ability to report and actually see action taken to address these things is much more limited than what I've seen on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
right? The
absolutely.
behavior is maybe more accepted or tolerated because the thought is, well, you put yourself out on a public platform, so you should be prepared for it. No, no one should be prepared to be treated like garbage at
Yeah.
all.
All right. Let's get to our next. It's not really an article. It's kind of a video I wanted to share with you all. Oh, I let me mute that. There we go. All right. So this particular video is by the Wall Street Journal, and it's talking about Apple's and Samsung's supply chain and their shift away from China. Now, this was posted about 10 months ago, so I'm sure there's been some more information since then. But it's fascinating because they're talking about moving the smartphones away into India and Vietnam. And I think their production is up 25% and 20 to 30% in India. But they're saying that by doing this, they're insulated from supply chain shocks and that they've actually reduced most of their labor on the smartphone side by 70%, but they've kept their semiconductors in China. And
Correct.
so this is a really great example of taking a look at your supply chain and rejigging it after the pandemic to really figure out how to de-risk your supply chain and how you want to do that, where you want to go with your manufacturing. And you don't have to move everything. You just need to shift things potentially that make sense for you and your business. What did you think about this?
I mean, it's obviously that if two of the world's largest telecom, device providers are doing it, maybe we should all consider it, right?
Mhm.
And it was interesting to me because de-risking is the exact word that they used, and I saw that it went into four specific categories, right? There's geopolitical, right? There are things that are going on: Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, Israel, Gaza, all of that going on, and you also have as a result of the pandemic, right? So the sweeping shutdowns and things that went on in China because of the Chinese government's very tight control of practices during the pandemic. You want to be able to kind of diversify and give yourself some optionality with that. Also, lower labor costs. Let's be real, China's middle class is growing and growing. They're becoming more consumers than maybe even what you would expect, right? So they're consuming more of the product that used to be exported out of the country. So the lower labor costs in Vietnam and India specifically is something that these companies were looking into. And then finally, and this is not least of all, the punitive tariffs on China, right? 7.5, 15, 25%. These are things that were put in place during the Trump administration, and the Biden administration has not decided to reduce or to release them. And so these are four major areas where you can safeguard or at least put some elasticity, right, into your supply chain.
Yeah, well, they're also talking about new markets for them to be able to sell their smartphones in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what they also mentioned was that you have to be delicate when diversifying your supply chain because of all of those things that you just mentioned, right? You don't want to burn bridges. It's like anything else. We really don't want to burn those bridges. And so, how are we going to navigate this? What does it mean to our business? India, for example, when it comes to Apple, is a really big market for them to focus on to actually sell the product in. And
Exactly.
so, for them to move and shift some of their manufacturing to India, based on the projections that they have on the sales side of things, actually makes sense. And then Apple, interestingly enough, so Samsung is leaving their semiconductor chip manufacturing in China for now. I mean, that's what it said in this particular video. But Apple has moved the chip manufacturing into the US. Now, I know the Biden administration has provided some funding for that as well. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But they're talking about how not only delicate diversifying your supply chain you have to be, but also it's costing billions of dollars to reshift, rethink, and move some of these manufacturing facilities, or moving the products being made or put together into different parts of the world as well. And so this is a huge undertaking and something that is absolutely fascinating, especially if you're a shipper in supply chain, whether you're an importer or an exporter, and really taking a look at where you want your supply chain to be, but also a great example to take to your executive team to start that conversation if you haven't started that yet.
Exactly. And Sarah, I want to point out something that the article mentioned, like as a last little flippant thing, which I thought was
Mhm.
probably like the crux of it all. Guess what? A lot of your suppliers are still in China.
Yep.
And so while your manufacturing and assembly can take place in Southeast Asia, India, guess what? A lot of the parts and components are still
Mhm.
being manufactured in China. And so you're still going to have some secondary or tertiary ripple effect
Mhm.
from those different types of risk we talked about until you can truly diversify and find ways to get your parts and components out from outside the Chinese manufacturing sphere.
Yeah, well, and also if you're moving them country to country, I mean, you got to figure
Yep.
out, your HS codes, your duty,
Correct.
taxes. What does that mean? I mean,
Yep.
there's so much to think about and so much to figure out. It can be done though, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
supply chain professionals, and that's that's why we are one of the best industries, I think, in the world. All right, let's get to our last article. Now, this one is from Supply Chain Brain. It's talking about empowering women in supply chain and bridging the gaps, fostering a supportive community. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this one to the table as well, it kind of goes with what we were talking about, but we need to keep talking about it, right?
Mhm.
There's more work to be done. I think the numbers are up, which is great, but we still have challenges with unconscious bias, work life balance, personal safety, which ties into what we were talking about in that first article, which nobody really thinks about. It's kind of like with the blended pledge, how we give away grants to cover travel expenses so that diverse voices can say yes to speaking engagements. Most
Yep.
people don't know that travel expenses are the number one barrier to seeing
Correct.
diversity on industry stages. And an interesting stat said that 16% of women, the reason behind exits from women is lack of flexibility. And I want to point out that last week, Dell, I think, came out publicly and said that they will only be promoting those who are in the office, which, I mean,
Tell me you
that's
don't care
stat.
about your okay, tell me you don't care about your employees without telling me you don't care about your employees.
Well, but I also think with that 16% and the lack of flexibility with women staying in positions or staying with organizations, which we need, that does not help because I believe that majority of the workforce that is working remotely are women so that they can do the caregiving. And
Correct.
a lot of them are caregiving up with parents. A lot of them are caregiving down with children. And we definitely need that flexibility to succeed. And we need organizations to be, behind us to be able to do that. So, what did you think? We've only got about a minute or so left.
Honestly, I like the points that this article made. I think that they were salient, right, about, swing shifts, being able to get backup help in the family when you have kids that, you need to get picked up from school, things like that. But one of the things that really stood out to me was that developing a community, being a
Mhm.
mentor where you can, being a voice for people to say, like, yeah, I'm doing it. Here's how, and I want to connect with you, right? And I want to share with you. And like that's one of the things I love about the conferences that we've been to, Sarah, but also that I'm able to be part of, I'm part of the Virginia Maritime Association. We have the event VMA 24, and we're thinking actively of these things. How do we make it so that it's approachable and it's able to be attended by people of all backgrounds, right? And a
Mhm.
little shameless plug, VMA 24, October 8th through the 10th in Norfolk, Virginia. Look it
Good.
up. Look up my LinkedIn, and I'll give you information there. But yeah, I think a seat at the table. I'm not looking for necessarily. You and I had this little pre-chat. I'm not looking for equality, right? Because I I think of myself as external to that. I have diverse experiences. I have a background that gives my thought processes are unique, and I don't want to be treated as equal, but I want to be at the table so that my voice can be heard.
Yeah, equal opportunities. And the power of community is really important. You're
Yeah.
going to be part of the Woman in Supply Chain, our Woman in
Yeah.
Supply Chain virtual monthly meetup, cohort number 2, which I'm
Woo-hoo!
super excited about because I can't wait. We're 50% sold out. So if you want to be part of that, make sure to sign up for your membership. All right, let's get to the events and where we're going to be. So April 30th to May 1st, I'm going to be at the 3rd annual Supply Chain Symposium with Firmament over in Miami. June 5th through 7th, I'm going to be at the Global Supply Chain Marketing Summit as well. And then June 9th and 11th, I'm going to be with TMSA at their Logistics, Marketing, and Sales Conference, which I'm super excited about. And this month, I'm going to be at Relax Live, which is their user conference in Atlanta, coming up in 2 weeks. And I'm going to be hosting Coupa TV at Coupa Inspire in Vegas as well. And then in September, we've also got Commit events. They've got a retail event in September that's a do not miss. Holly, I'm going to send you information for that because I think you might want to be there. And anyways, so that's it for us today. Thanks so much for everybody for watching. I believe Audrey is going to be back next week as well. So Holly, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's always fun to chat with you. I think we get into some of the good details.
We do. Bye, everybody.